As you work in your spreadsheet and you become more confident with the formulas that you write and the functions that you use, at some point you're going to bump into a place where the if statement isn't quite what you need, because instead of having one condition that you're testing for, you find that you're testing for 3 or 4 or 8 or 16 or whatever. And in Google Sheets, there's actually not a limit to the amount of ifs that you can put together to come up with the answers that you need. So if I use an if statement, I have one condition, but if I find that I need to have another if within my formula, then what I am doing is nesting ifs. Hi, I'm Terry, one of the Consumer Technology Specialists for Mid-Continent Public Library. And today we are going to look at some examples of how you can nest ifs within Sheets. As we look at our example, we can see that we have 16 days worth of information, and in column B it even shows that we have some numbers here, and I'm going to suggest that those are high temperatures for the day, with the idea that maybe we want to make a temperature afghan or a temperature quilt, and then instead of actually defining the colors that go in the quilt, we're just going to put in some sort of a label or a comment. If you look over at the right where I have the list of temperatures, we can see that I've subdivided those temperatures with 3 labels, and that is where if gets really interesting. So I'm going to click to the right of our first day's temperature and go to our functions button and go down to logical and then over to the left to if. And my logical expression is if B2 is less than 40, and I know as soon as I click on this F6 that I need to come back in front of the F and press my F4 key on my keyboard so that I make that an absolute reference. Then what am I going to do? Well, first of all, we'll put in a comma to show that we have finished our logical expression. So what is the value if true? Well, the value if true is BR, so I'll put in quotes, BR, and then I'll put in my comma, and this is where it gets interesting because I have 2 possible false values. So I'm going to say, well, I need to do another if to test which one is true and which one is false. So I need to put in if and then a left paren, and it starts us all over with another level of ifs. So this time, what is my logical expression? Well, I'm going to test for B2 again, but this time I'm going to test for if B2 is less than 70 degrees or F9. And I know that I need to come to the left of the F and press the F4 key and then put in my comma. What is the value if true? Well, I've already tested for less than 40, so this part of my chart is kind of used up. Less than 70 is comfy. And I'll put in quotes, comfy, and then a comma, because I've said what's true. Now I'll put in what is false. I love today. So we'll put in quotes, I love today. And then I need to be careful here, because looking at my statement, I have a left paren and a second left paren. So I need to have 2 right parentheses at the end and press enter. Now it's going to try to autofill for me, and I think that's great. So we're going to click the check mark. Let's see if the answers we received are actually what we wanted. So coming over first of all to the high degrees of 20, it says BR, and that is correct according to my chart. And then I'm going to come down to 52 degrees, comfy, and let's see, 52 is within the comfy range. And then on day 3, we even have I love today. Let's see, and 72 is within the I love today range. And so it's a very quick, easy way to see that what we have done is correct. Let me click in C2 where we can see that it tests for B2 and what that true is, but because I had several false possibilities, I start with if again in that false part of the first statement, and I do another test for B2 and do that second test. This time I have a true and a false, and so I can end that particular formula. Looking at our new example, if we look on the right where I have the chart of temperatures, we can see that instead of 3 possibilities, we have 4. So here I have potentially a true answer and then 3 falses that I need to go through and try to just work my way through testing for true and false and true and false until I get to the end of this chart. So in C2, I'll again go to the functions button and go to logical, and on the left select if. So my first logical expression is if B2 is less than, and we've changed this a little bit, so it's F6, but we know that we need to go in front of the F and press F4 to add in our dollar signs for the absolute reference, and then put in our comma according to the pattern, and then it says, okay, what is the value if true? Well, the value if true is and then I put in my comma, and then it says, okay, well, what's the value of false? And we're going, oh my gosh, we have 3 possibilities here. So what I need to do is simply start with another if. So I'll type if and a left parenthesis and start with another test. So what is my next test? Well, is B2 less than, and what's my next level here? It's at F8 and 50 degrees. So again, I'll click in front of the F, press the F4 for dollar signs for absolute references, and then type the comma. And what happens if that value is true? So it's less than 50. Well, our chart says quotes, so we'll put in quotes, and end that with quotation marks, and then follow the pattern with a comma. What is the value if false? Well, we still have 2 values, either sweaters or yippee. So we're going to start this whole thing over again by typing if and put in the left parenthesis. And what is our logical expression? Well, we're going to test for B2 again. This time, is it less than 80 degrees in F11? And we know that we need to click in front of the F and press F4 on the keyboard to add in the absolute value. And then we'll put in the comma according to our pattern here. And then what is the value of true? Well, if it's less than 80 degrees, our guide here says sweaters, so we'll put in quotes, sweaters. And what is the value if false? Once I put in that comma, it is yippee. And end that with a quote as well. Now I have 1, 2, 3 left parentheses, so I need to have 3 right parentheses as well. I have those, so I'll press enter, and we'll do the autofill, and let's check what we've done to make sure that we are correct. In B2, we have a burr, and according to the chart, that is in fact burr. In B3, we have, B3, B4, and B5. We have sweaters. So let's see. We have 52 and 72, and that is within the sweaters range. Well, in our next set of cells here, we have 43 and 45, and that says coats. And again, that is exactly right. It's less than 50, so it's coats. And let's see down at the very bottom here, the last 2, we have 82 and 92 for yippee, and those fit within our chart. So our logic was correct, and that was our nested if with 4 levels of possibilities. What we have done so far by way of the logic and always testing B2 to see if it's less than a value may make a lot of sense to you. But what if it doesn't? What if you would rather use a test that asks if B2 is greater than or equal to a value? Can you do that? So basically, can I use the opposite kind of logic from what we have been doing? And the answer is, of course, yes, you can. So let's do an example of that. Starting here at C2, where we want our answer, we'll again go to our functions button and then go down to logical, and on the left find if. And our test this time is if B2 is greater than or equal to, and we'll start at the top here, 80. Well, we'll put in our comma, and what is our answer? If it's greater than or equal to 80, that is yippee. And we'll put that in quotes. We'll add our comma. But what is our value of false? Well, we have 3 falses. When we have 3 possible false answers, we need to add in another if. So we'll add if in the left parenthesis. And our logical test this time will be, is B2 greater than or equal to 50 in F8? And again, we know that that F8 needs to be an absolute reference, so I'll put that in. And as I look back, I see that I skipped it in F11, so I'm going to go to the left of the F11 and press my F4 a second time to make sure that I have absolute references for both of those. Now, I have a logical expression, and my pattern says I need to put in a comma. And what happens if B2 is greater than or equal to 50? Well, it's going to be sweaters. So we'll put in our quotes, sweaters, and then our pattern says we need to put in a comma. What is the value of false? Well, it could be coats or it could be burr. So what do we need to do? Create another if. And with a left parenthesis, then we start all over again with a logical expression. So we're going to say, okay, is B2 greater than or equal to 30? And let me be sure to click to the left of the F and press the F4 key, and then add our comma as we know we need to do. Now, what if that is true? Well, it's coats and the quotation marks, and then to follow the pattern we need to add the comma. And then what happens if it's false? Well, finally we're down to one choice, which is burr. And we'll press enter, and we want to, of course, use the autofill to complete that answer. And then let's double check what we have done. So starting at B2, where it's 20 degrees, it says burr, and if we look at our chart, that's correct. If we look at the next levels of day 2, day 3, day 4, they all say sweaters, and according to that, we have 50s and 70s here, 50s to 70s in our chart. The next cells have coats, and they're both in the 40s, and if the weather's in the 40s, we want to use that. And then coming down to the very bottom, we can come down to 82 and 92. Those are yippee. There is probably a limit to the number of ifs that you can nest. You are limited to 4,000 characters in a function, so you might want to keep that in mind. But let's look just very quickly at our formula here. And B2, we tested against F11, against F8, against F6, and each time we put in, well, here's the true, but for the false, we just have to do more testing. We did more testing. Again, we had a true, but we had to do more testing for the false until we could come up with a true and a false, and then it was finished. So, yes, we can either test for greater than or less than, and whatever logic makes sense to you, that is the one that you use when you use nested ifs. To learn even more, be sure to go to mymcpl.org/online learning for such great resources as Universal Class, Learning Express Library, LinkedIn Learning, and Udemy Business. We also premiere videos every Wednesday and Friday at 1 o'clock. If you miss a video premiere, you'll still be able to find it later when it's convenient for you. You can find us on Facebook at MCPL 360, and you can find us on YouTube by going to our MCPL MO channel.